I think kind of it goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is the whole idea of marketing in general, right? Like, what problem are you solving, or what need are you fulfilling? So I think, if you're trying to build a brand, there's got to be a reason why you're building it. It's not just, I want to put something out there and I want to be a brand creator. So I think you really need to kind of figure out like what's your why. I think I say that all the time, but it's like, what is your why? And I think going back to what is your why constantly and checking and being like, am I being true to my why? That doesn't mean your why can't evolve, but I think it's figuring out like what is your why and then doing all those other things to support that so that at the end of the day, like you're really being true to what your original objective was.
All right. Well, welcome everybody back to the Full Battery Media Podcast. I am your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Can you tell people who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name is Jill Nordquist. I am a marketing and licensing leader with over 2 decades of experience working in consumer packaged goods as well as other industries. And I'm a big branding nerd.
That's awesome. How did you get started in this field, and what was it that pulled you down this direction in the first place?
So I actually was not planning on going into business at all. I was an English major in college and I was doing a summer
Uh,
internship before going back to school to get my master's and PhD in English Lit. And I took a summer
uh,
internship, and the summer internship was in marketing. And I absolutely fell in love with marketing because, similar to literature and reading, it's all about storytelling. So I got really engrossed in the world of marketing, decided to defer my graduate studies, and instead became a marketing professional.
I love it because I love it when I got into marketing. I realized marketing was great storytelling, and that I had to figure out what stories connected with people. And to me, it was always this beautiful challenge of trying to figure out how to bridge the place from here to here. You have this thing that you're trying to sell to someone, but how do you get to here where, you've gone through this whole process of getting them to trust you, they see you, then suddenly they buy it. And to me, what I found was really interesting was when I watched the way people did it organically and naturally. And to me, like some of the greatest brands, they were selling to me and I didn't even know I was getting sold to. And I was like, how genius is that? And so I wanted to ask you too, like, this question has always stuck with me. Like, why? And first of all, I got to show you something. I'm a little obsessive with branding. Can you give me one
Yeah.
second? I'm going to go a little, let's show you something here. I like to have fun and I go a little overboard, a bit much. So I just like to have my brand seen and front and center when I can. And so I love hats. And for so long, I had this realization that I was wearing everyone else's hats. I would wear a team, I would wear a brand. And so I was like, not wearing mine. So I started doing my company logo in all different color segues. And the idea was, I was like, I like this one because it looks like green. I like this one because I do videos for my wife and daughter and I wanted to have some girl power. And then, I did some for my wife's brand. And so we just got these for my wife's company, Velocity Media, and it's in a jeans. And then I was like, oh, black on black. That's for my wife. And so I get a little bit over the top, but my workers crack up about it. But they wear the hats everywhere and
Um,
people ask about them. And I'm going back to I just got a bunch of hats made for my wine podcast because I have a bunch of podcasts. I have a wine podcast as well called Barrels and Roots. I grew up in the Napa Valley and I'm going back to film this wine documentary. Why? Because I want to film a harvest documentary. Right now, the wine industry is hurting. Wine is going in a weird direction right now. And yet, what made me fall in love with wine was not just the drink, but to to all the people. Do you know what it's like in harvest? These people suddenly they are at this point where they are just checking the sugars on these grapes, and they are just meticulously checking the sugars for this whole vineyard. And suddenly they're like, we're there. And they have to mobilize all these people and pull in all of these huge vineyards in a period of 2 weeks. Otherwise, the sugars go too high, they lose grapes, and and so people are up from like 2 in the morning, and they go until like 12 at night. And there's just like for this whole massive amount of like 2.5, 3 weeks. And I was like, I want to go there. So I have like 15 wineries that are all like, Sean, come and film with us. So I'm gonna go to 15 different
Oh
wineries,
my
15
gosh.
different days, and film a documentary behind the scenes. I'm gonna probably not be there the whole day because I
Mhm.
don't know how I can handle that much filming and footage. But there's gonna be places that I'm going late night, places that I'm going early morning. But when I'm there, I was like, I need to leave them with something that they'll remember me and the podcast. So I got these beautiful hats made, and they have this monogrammed barrels and roots BR on the front. And I was just like, and my team was like, those look good. And I said, they do. And why did you make them though? Because I said, I want people to start a story.
Mhm.
So afterwards, after I'm left, and they're like, this is a beautiful hat. And someone's running around, they're like, wow, what's that hat from? That pops out. And they go, well, I'm gonna tell you, and I'm
Yeah.
sitting there going, hello.
Yeah.
But it leads to a question that I had for you, is why do some brands make people feel emotional, nostalgic, and are remembered even years later? What are they
Mhm.
doing right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the example you just gave, right, about how you're going to give these hats to people during a specific experience, right?
Right?
So when they wear the hat and they're out and about in the Napa Valley area and people say to them, what is that? It's going to bring them back to that experience that they had, whether they were the person that just had a conversation with you or if they were the person that was staying up all night and measuring the sugar levels. And so I think when done right, I think branding can take you back to a moment in time and can
Yes.
evoke that specific experience in a way that it doesn't just make you think, oh yeah, that's when I met Sean, but it really takes you back to that moment. Like maybe you remember that the sun was shining or that it was really dark out or that it was cold or that the sun just rose, And so I think that's what brands do. And I think some of that is organic, but I think some of that is also curated, specifically. And that's what kind of gives you that whole experience.
Love that. I love it. I love how you talk about remembering certain things and they take you back to an experience. Like, I've got this weird association with not with a brand, but with a memory. And it's wild like that because now when I think about this one director, early in my career, I got to work on some movies with some famous directors. And one of the ones that was the most fun was I got to work on the movie Angels and Demons with Ron Howard. Now, I was booked initially as a background extra in that, which is literally the most unglamorous thing. I just moved up to LA. I had no idea about anything. And when I was there, I got booked, and they wanted me to be first of all, I got a call. They're like, "Can you work for 4 days as a Swiss guard?" And it's like, I'm not gonna be able to do that. And they're like, "All right, all right." And I said, "I can't take 4 days off from work right now. Not gonna be. The numbers don't match up." And so I got a call back, and I'm driving. Pulled over the side of the road, and they're like, "Hey, we need to talk to you." I was like, "Okay, we like your look. We want you to come back, and we need you here to be an Italian riot cop." I'm like, first of all, I don't think I look that Italian. But second of all, it was kind of funny because I was like, well, how many days is it? Like 14 days. And I was just like, okay, that's going to be, really tough to get out of that much work. But I said, okay, let's do it. Let's see what happens. It was the best decision I ever made because it started off my entire journey in media and content. I got to meet people, I got to spend time on set, and then I got to make so many connections there that they kept me on the movie for 6 months.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
got to work with them. And so it was amazing. But whenever I see certain places in the Vatican, I think images of the Vatican, it just takes me back to that movie because they couldn't get any permission to shoot at the Vatican, so they built the
Hmm.
Vatican in Los Angeles, and if I see a kind of Vignette, an Italian riot cop in uniform, I just think of all the guys that were sitting there, and there's a
Mhm.
bunch of people from LA that were like doing all types of jobs, and all dressed as Italian riot cops. But like that nostalgia, that
Yeah.
connection takes you back, and I mean, I think some of the greatest brands are able to understand that. And I want to, ask you because you've worked with some brands that are really interesting, like Barbie and Hot Wheels. And I'm gonna, I've got little Hot Wheels around my room. We love them in my house, my daughter and my nephews. But what did those brands understand about kids that other companies miss? And not just kids, but people. Because let's be real, they understand people.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really special and was really special during my 14 years at Mattel was Mattel really puts kids first. And so their whole goal is to really put the kids' experience first. And that really starts in understanding kids. They did a ton of consumer research and they would test everything from, concepts to play patterns to trends. But then they would also conduct research on product specific things. So everything from
Yeah.
does this colorway work or do you like these features or
Uh,
does this advertising resonate? And then they would also keep on staff experts in child development and how that impacts how they interact with toys. So they would take into consideration,
uh,
where a child's brain is during different stages of life and what their dexterity levels are and what their emotional needs are, and then really build toys around that. So it was really about understanding who the end consumer was and then building the experience to suit those needs.
I love that. It's interesting too because like you think about it and you're like sitting there going, "Oh, it's just this," but there is a whole world of thought behind anything that you are consuming, whether it be your coffee, your sandwich, your car, your toys. There is so much thought that goes into everything. And it's interesting too, because I wanted to ask you this. If a toy or product is basically the same, like why do some versions become massively popular while others fail? Because I mean, I think back about some of the toys that were the most wildly successful in my life. I remember as a kid, I'm gonna date myself here, but Cabbage Patches were
Hmm.
like a thing, and we
Yep.
we went to the Cabbage Patch factory,
Hmm.
and we went there to the factory, and it was so 80s, and it was wild because we went to the factory, and I remember seeing this person, and they were like, it was like this bench, and my uncle bought my cousin the custom one, and suddenly there's like someone shoves this toy up through the cabbage, and she's like, "Ah, it was born from the cabbage." It was wild, and it was like so like this whole experience, and like I mean, my the kids were just eating it up. My cousin, my sister, and, it was everyone was just eating it up. But like that, or years later, Tickle Me Elmo. My goodness, a toy that just even now people can still remember it. And my
Hmm.
daughter now with some of the nostalgia, she's 10 years old and she's like, Dad, I want to get a Tamagotchi. I want this
Hmm.
digital toy.
Yeah,
Have
Tamagotchi's
you ever
back.
heard about that?
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, have I heard about Tamagotchi? I mean, I grew up with that stuff,
Yeah.
and it's wild because some things are just so memorable and they just have this evergreen nature to it.
Yeah.
What how does that succeed and the others then fail? How does that work, you
I mean,
know?
I think there's two aspects, right? I think there's one which is unfortunately is timing, right? I think that like
Yeah.
timing's everything. Like there's that whole, adage that you can either be first to market or you can be best to market. And in an ideal situation,
Uh,
you could be both, right? You're providing both the first of its kind and it's the best experience. But I think the other piece is really the emotional piece. And it all goes back to that again. It's like, how does this make someone feel? And obviously, the product has to be quality and it has to be enjoyable. But I think that there's also that aspect of like authenticity that then feeds into that emotional pull, and something might make you feel a certain way. And then, of course, like I think times are so different. Like the two examples that you gave, were way back in like 80s, 90s, right? And that was pre-digital age. I think now in the digital age, some things hit because somebody naturally comes across a product or a toy or whatever it is, and then they might record something about it, they might post something about it, and then the what they're feeling and what they're evoking resonates with somebody else, and then all of a sudden it becomes like
Mhm.
the hottest thing. So I do think it's like the circumstances, everything has to kind of line up, but I think timing plus emotion are really like the two secret ingredients.
Right? Like, you you don't know what's gonna hit and when it's gonna hit.
Yeah.
And, like, that's one of the things I see with content when people come to me and they go, "What's the secret of content? What should I be creating right now?" I'm like, "I have no idea." What I do know is if you can stay consistent enough and continue to create and produce at a high enough level,
Mhm.
you have a higher chance of hitting at some point in time. But if you're not getting things out there, you have to find a way to keep going. And obviously, you're testing trends, you're looking at feedback, and you're checking to see what's doing well and what's not. Granted, you're looking at all that things, but you have to keep trying. You have to keep showing up, and
Yeah.
you have to keep putting yourself out there
Yeah.
because otherwise, there's that Michael Jordan thing. You're going to miss all the shots you
Right.
don't take. But um, and one of the things that I wanted to ask about too, like a lot of people think marketing is just advertising. What is marketing actually supposed to do?
Yeah, it is funny that you say that because I think that's such an interesting question because advertising is also very different now than it was back when those products that you just referenced hit, right?
Right.
So, marketing is way bigger than advertising. Marketing is about starting with solving a problem or creating a solution or inspiring a consumer or just sparking imagination. And
Right.
it's a promise, right? It's a promise that identifies a need
Hmm.
in the marketplace and then it creates and delivers a product that addresses that need. And so once you figure that out and that's established, then you have to create this brand identity and you have to stay true to it, like you were talking about being consistent. And and then it's about distributing this product, and then I think the things like advertising and social media, those are marketing levers, but they're not all there is to marketing. And when we say
Right.
things like advertising is so different now. Back in the day, everyone was doing advertising was TV commercials, on linear TV. And now
Yeah.
advertising is more subtle. Advertising can be having an innovative package or
Yeah.
the packaging communication points or the delivery system. Or it could be because, somebody stumbled upon it, and started to talk about it and promote it. So I think it's so much more. It's like it's from the grain of an idea to when it sits in front of the consumer, whether that be on shelf or online.
Yes. And I think that one of the things that I've seen is like you have so many more ways to get people's attention now. And I don't know if that's always a good thing, but there are so many ways you can do it. Right now, one of the campaigns that I've been cracking up about is the Dr. Pepper guy. Have you seen that?
I love that.
Whoever came up with that campaign is an absolute genius. It's so cheap. You just pay this weird guy to show up at places and to hand celebrities Dr. Pepper. And I was like, it understands social media so well. It understands the live streaming stuff so well. And it's just like high ROI, you
Yeah.
have this very simple thing with very high ROI. But like the cool part is that's one way to do it. There's a bunch of ways that you can do it. And it can look a bunch of different ways. I'm still trying to figure out if McDonald's had this absolute genius thing that they did and they told their CEO to eat a hamburger in a funny way.
Oh
You
gosh.
know, right? Like that, the hamburger eating thing, because whether they meant to or not, man, they got a lot of attention. They got a lot of attention.
Right.
You know, was it the right attention? I don't know.
Right.
But, one of the things that I wanted to ask you this, like, I saw this master class by Kim Kardashian, and she was just like, "Get attention." Now, I wanted to ask you, is any attention good, or do you need to be careful the type of attention that you're gathering in this day and age?
I think both. Some people say any press is good press, right? And in the case of like the example you just gave with McDonald's, I think a lot of us cringed when we watched the CEO attempt to take a bite of a hamburger, and everyone was like, "Have you never eaten a hamburger?" Like, it was so bizarre, right? Um, but it definitely put it into, what I call the chatter, right? Like it's like all of a sudden in social chatter, you were hearing now about McDonald's. I don't eat McDonald's. I don't think I've had something from McDonald's since I was 9, but it definitely got me talking about McDonald's because we all saw this, right? And then it kind of we all had some sort of reaction to it. So I think, on the one hand, yeah, you could say any press is good press. But I also think that today we're not really able to control the narrative the way that we used to
Ugh.
because there's so much social media and people are so connected and people are online all the time. So I think part of being a brand and part of like building community within brands is that you also have to realize that the brand is not 100% your own. So you can put out there
Mm.
what the brand represents, what it stands for, and be authentic to that. But you also have to be aware that there is a whole army or subset of people that are either on chat boards or they're just in the comments that people are taking the narrative and sometimes they're agreeing with the what you put out there, and other times it kind of goes off script and it takes on its own life.
I think that that's interesting too, because one of the things that I've seen is that there are things that take on their own life entirely. I got a call from Mr. Beast team.
Mhm,
They called me up and they're because they know that I'm the video guy that has the company in Vietnam that does a lot of content and media. And so I worked with some of the people from like one of the other teams that's in that group. And I got a call from them and they're like, Yeah, Sean, we need to talk to you about this trend in Vietnam." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And there's this trend happening for one of the guys, and we have no idea what it is because it's this trend in Vietnam that has taken on its own life. And can you help us figure out what this all is? And I sat down with my team and I was like, "Guys, what is this?" And they were like, it's nothing." And I was like, "What do you mean it's nothing?" They're like, "It's just ridiculous." Like everyone was trying to support this one kid, Carl, in Mr. Beast team, right? And Carl was always getting picked on at that time. And they just was like, and so they were doing these weird, like, koan poems that made no sense. It was like nonsensical sentences. But the whole idea was just to take a picture of Carl and put this nonsensical sentence. That was the trend. And it started as one thing and it just became this whole other thing. And the Mr. Beast team was like, "What is this?" Because it took on its own life and went this whole other direction, but yet it was still attention.
mhm,
And so they wanted to see what this attention was, learn what it was, and then get ahead of it
mhm,
or use it,
mhm,
because at the end of the day, people are talking about you. And if
mhm,
you're not aware of what they're saying, that's your disadvantage.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you definitely need to stay on top of what people are saying, but I also think you need to like I think in the earliest days of social media, I think there were companies that were really worried about making sure that as they were reading what was going on online and in the comments, that they would interject. And I think part of branding now is you kind of have to just step back and let people say what they want. Obviously, hopefully it's nothing, inappropriate. But
Right.
I think that's part of branding, right? Is you kind of
Right.
set the stage and then often it's really the consumers or the end users who are building that brand voice for you.
Yeah. Because I think that the going back to the McDonald's thing, I think the absolute winner of that whole thing was Wendy's. Wendy's social accounts were just crushing. They were ruthless. Oh my goodness. They were so ruthless. And when the CEO of McDonald's, I think, blocked them, and they were just like, yes. And they were just coming down because they weren't trying to, they were along for the ride,
Yeah.
and I do think that, like, you're right. Sometimes people try to, you're going to control this narrative. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to see where it goes, keep your amusement and humor, and step up. There was one lady that I saw. It was a video online, and gotta give her credit. It was a Instagram video, and she was just talking to her sister, and her two sisters were giving their other sister a hard time. And she had her hair pulled back in the video, and because of the way her hair was pulled back, it made her forehead look very large. And she started getting roasted for it, which was completely inappropriate. If I was getting roasted that hard, would probably have a hard time with it. I'd probably get defensive. She did not. She got spicy,
Yeah.
she got sassy, and she went into the comments and was just having a blast. And then she tagged that post with a response post that she had a filter that made her forehead look even bigger to draw people to her page. And then she started marketing them
Yeah.
something as she started pulling people in. I was just like, what a genius right there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, it's using that attention and going for the ride, but then seeing where you can take it. But, like, I want to ask you this, because what's the difference between a company that just sells products and a company that builds real community? Because we're seeing companies now that are starting to really lean in and build community as well in the midst of all this. Can
Yeah.
you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such an interesting dynamic. I think that there are certain industries that are better at it than others. Um, I'm a runner, and I think like running brands have gotten really good at building community. And that's because instead of just marketing like a shoe or apparel, what they're doing is they're either hosting pop-ups or if they have a store, they're inviting people not only to come in and maybe try out the shoe or the apparel, but they're coordinating community runs, and
Uh-huh.
they're putting together experiences. And you don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to buy the shoe. You don't have
Uh-huh.
to wear the apparel. Oftentimes you can do the run in the shoe. You can try it
Yeah.
out and then return it when you're done. And I think they're really good about creating this community. And then what happens is it goes back to what we were talking about before about taking you back to that moment in time. Often at these
Uh-huh.
events, you meet other runners and you bond because you have the common, the common interest of running. And then what ends up happening is every time that let's say it was a running event for Hoka. Then every time
Yeah.
you run in your Hokas or you look at a pair of Hokas, it takes you back to that time that you were like, oh, yeah, remember we went to that pop up event? Or do you remember that community run we did? Or, oh, yeah, that's where I met so and so.
Uh-huh.
And it really gives you that feeling that this isn't just a brand, but it's really a lifestyle.
Right? I think that that's one of the things too, is that, can you I I'm building my own company on the side. And one of the companies, not just Full Battery Media, my production company, I'm building Odie. Odie is OATY. It's named after a trail in the Napa Valley,
Hmm.
and the Oat Hill Mine Trail, but all of the locals call it Odie.
Okay.
And it's this mine trail. And what we're doing is, my brother and I are sitting there thinking about, hats and shirts and bags that people could go, that are functional,
Mhm.
fun. And I'm starting to build that brand. I'm not selling anything yet. I've got a bunch of hats
Yeah.
that my brother and I have at our house. We got some bags that I'm developing and testing. But you know what I am doing? I'm wearing it in all of my posts. In my podcasts, I
Yeah.
talk about it. I'm chronicling the journey, and I'm putting things out there, because for me, it's something that can connect with people, that
Mhm.
they see there's a story behind it.
Mhm.
And I was thinking that, you know, one of the things that I think is so huge is to be able to bridge that connection. And I have had people then message me going, dude, where can I get some Odie stuff? On the podcast. Like they're just reaching out and they're like, I
Mm.
want some Odie. Where can I get an Odie? And I was like, well, send me your address. I'll get you one. And it's interesting because I think that community and the ability to connect with people is so powerful. I saw it for the first time in a big way when, after I went on to that Ron Howard movie, I realized that I didn't want to do any more background acting and I got into production.
Mhm.
But for a time, I was working at a hair salon in Los Angeles, which I still have this impeccable superpower. I can spot when someone has gotten a haircut in
Mhm.
an instant. It's weird. I don't know. I worked in a hair salon for 4 years, but someone will walk in, I'm like, oh, you got a new haircut. And they're like, how did you notice that? I was like, it happens when you work in a hair salon for 4 years. But I was doing all of their social and it was right when YouTube was getting going, right when Facebook was bringing video in. And my boss handed me a little camera. It was like we're talking old school, really basic thing. And it had this little thing that flipped out and I would film a little USB that would flip out. And that was why it was called a flip uh, camera. And I started filming really basic, editing on not GarageBand, iMovie,
Mhm.
and then putting up these videos up on YouTube, like really basic stuff. And if I look back at those, I would be very embarrassed by them. However, I made a lot of people a lot of money, like a lot of money, because what I did is we were putting these on and we were based in Hollywood. We were having people fly out from all over the US
Mhm.
going, and they knew all of the names of all of the people that worked there. They would walk in and go, "Oh, where's Mateo? Oh, where's
Yeah.
Nelly?"
Yep.
And it was wild because they knew everyone. And these
Yeah.
people were and some of the people who didn't make videos in the beginning were coming up to me going, "Sean, can we make videos now? Can you help me make videos? I want to be in these videos." Because they created this community. And again, it was like social media has enabled that more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you listen to a podcast and you get to know, like, the the cast, right? And the players, so to
Hmm.
speak, it's like you feel like you know them, you feel like you're part of that community, and then you meet somebody who also listens to that podcast, and there's, like, this instant bond and this connection. I think people crave connection, and then
Hmm.
the brand helps facilitate that connection.
Right? I want to ask you this too. Like, how do you think companies can create connections like that without seeming fake and going, we're being authentic? And then everyone's like, that's the like corner of like being inauthentic. How do you think brands can replicate that, that rawness, that honesty, that truth?
I think I think if they're true to who the brand is and they create either these events or these moments, I think that's what really can do it in a way that's authentic. So I think, for instance, when I talked about like a run meetup, right? That's something that's really authentic because this is a running
Hmm.
brand and they are hosting a community run. I think there's ways that other brands can do it as well. I think if you look at, like you mentioned, the outdoors and trails, I think if you look at something like Patagonia, I think they're a brand that's really remained very true to their initial original mission, and so when they do things, it seems authentic. And then there's that connection that's being fostered in a way that goes back to the heart of who they are. So I think that, if let's say you're a makeup brand and you host a running event, you'd be like, what does that even mean? Right. But if you're a makeup brand and you're hosting an event where you're helping people learn how to perfect the cat eye or whatever other sort of thing you're trying to do, I think that's a big part of it. It's like it all goes back to being true to who the brand is and what the brand like would or wouldn't do.
Right? I love that. And I think that I love the community idea. Like, I love the fact that I remember I bought this one car years ago, and just owning that car brought me into this group of people. They're like, oh, well, I lived in Northern California and I had a Subaru, and everyone's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a Subaru guy. So we know what you like. You like to go up to the mountains and explore things. I was like, Do I? I
Right.
guess I do. I'm part of the group now. Maybe I should. And I remember there were people at my school that I wasn't part of that cool group, but they were
Hmm.
like, "Oh, let's go skiing soon, man. I see you got the Subaru." And I was like, "Okay, let's go skiing. I'm down for that."
Yeah.
But it was cool like that, and that community is amazing. And there's so many cool groups that you can and companies that are doing it in a beautiful way. But I want to ask you another question. Um, because you started off with brands and you talked that you love branding. What are some things that if someone has a company or they're just a creator, what are some things that are like your absolute rules for doing great branding?
I mean, I think it really starts with establishing your brand from the beginning. I think that,
Uh,
sometimes people they jump ahead to the product and they just immediately are like, oh, I have this great product idea and I want to get it out there. And there's no brand behind it. And I think it's really important to step back and say, okay, we have this great item. And sometimes like the product comes first. But I do think you need to ultimately come up with like your brand guidelines. And it doesn't necessarily need to be super exhaustive or be something that makes you feel like um, you're populating a document just for the sake of doing it. But I think you really need to understand like what is your brand's mission? What is the vision you have? Like what are your brand values? What does the brand stand for? What would this brand do or what it wouldn't do? What are the words you would use or what are the words that are off limits? And so I think you really need to have that foundation there because where I've
mhm.
seen brands become either diluted or just have evoke no emotion whatsoever. I think it's because they just don't have that and they just kind of put this thing or this product out there and then they let it do its own thing. And a lot of times it just means nothing. I used to always say, there's a lot of brands that try to be everything to everyone. And I think when you try to become everything to everyone, you become nothing to everyone.
Yeah. Right. Right. If someone's listening right now and they want to build the next great brand, what do you think they should be doing right now?
So I think kind of it goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is the whole idea of marketing in general, right? Like what problem are you solving or what need are you fulfilling? So I think, if you're trying to build a brand, there's got to be a reason why you're building it. It's not
Yeah.
just I want to put something out there and I want to be a brand creator. So I think
Right.
you really need to kind of figure out like what's your why. I think I say that all the time, but it's like, what is your why? And I think going back to what is your why
Yes.
constantly and checking and being like, am I being true to my why? That doesn't mean your why can't evolve, but I think it's figuring out like what is your why and then doing all those other things to support that so that at the end of the day, like you're really being true to what your original objective was.
I agree entirely. I want to ask you this. Where can people go to find out more about you and what you do?
So I have a business called Brand Runner Consulting. I have a website called Brand Runner Consulting, and you can learn a little bit more about me there. And also, I don't post all the time on LinkedIn, but I think LinkedIn also gives a little bit of insight into my background and some of the different things that I've worked on and my thoughts about. I talk about branding and kind of who I am and what really resonates with me.